Very much, Jeannie, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Schreibfeder. I'm president of a company called Effective Inventory Management. What we do is help you effectively manage your inventory. Well, that's obvious by the name of our company. But what does that mean? Well, you should see in front of you now what we consider to be the goal of effective inventory management. This is what we think you're trying to do with your inventory. Meet or exceed your customers' expectations of product availability. That is the primary goal. If you don't do that, you're going to be out of business. But we want to do that with the amount of each item that you stock that will either maximize your net profits or minimize your total inventory cost. As Jeannie said, today's topic is trimming your inventory. I like the term trimming your inventory because especially in today's challenging economic environment, it's important that every dollar you have invested in stock inventory works as hard as possible for you. We see the economy expanding in many, many, many places. People don't have a lot of money to invest in more inventory. So we want to be sure that every dollar you have is working as hard as it possibly can to achieve this goal of effective inventory management. Some of the things that we're going to discuss today, we've already covered in previous webinars. We'll be expanding on those ideas. Plus, we have some other ideas for you. So I hope you stay tuned for the next hour or so. And please, as Jeannie said, let us know if you have questions. First of all, to achieve that goal of effective inventory management, meeting or exceeding your customers' expectations of product availability, we have to know that every item in our warehouse is something our customers want to buy or something our users want to use. When you stock a product, you're making a commitment to have that product available in reasonable quantities. Most warehouses are filled with what we call stock and stuff. Stock is the material that you intended to be out there that you need to meet or exceed your customers' expectations. Stuff is everything else. We have to separate the stock from the stuff. Separate your good inventory from what you might even term your junk. Now you establish an approved stock list for each of your warehouses, each of your stores, each of your facilities. Everyone should have their own approved stock list. How do we do that? Well, just consider why you stock products. Now I'm going to talk today about products that you stock for resale, selling to other companies. We have a few other concepts that are involved in products that are used in-house for things like repairs. But let's concentrate on inventory that you're buying to resell to somebody else. I would suggest to you that the more times you sell a product, the more reason you have to stock that product. The more times someone comes in and asks you for the item, regardless of the quantity that they ask for, the more reason you have to stock the product. You're probably more willing to stock a slower-moving, low-cost item than a slower-moving, high-cost item because you have fewer dollars invested. And, of course, profitability also plays a factor. We're going to look at that in detail in a minute. But I just want you to look at the three items that I have on slide number 6. I have three items, the A100, the B200, and the C300. The A100 I only sold twice in the past year. We call a sale a hit. A hit is a sale regardless of the actual quantity sold. Somebody comes in and asks you for some of an item, it is a hit, whether they ask you for 1 piece, 10 pieces, or 10,000 pieces. Now, item A100, we had 2 hits, 2 requests for the product. We sold a lot of it, $10,000 worth. But I would suggest to you that I'd like to make that a special order product if I possibly can. Why? Very, very expensive. Look at that annual cost of goods sold, and it's not being sold that often. Compare compare that to the C300. I'm selling it 50 times a year. About once a week, someone's coming in and asking for the C300. Low cost of goods sold, but I want to be sure I have it because people are always asking for it. One way I can trim my inventory is to concentrate on examining whether I want to stock each and every one of my expensive, slow-moving items. If your computer system doesn't accurately track hits, number of times a product is sold, don't worry about it. We can get the same type of analysis by looking at the number of months in the past 12 months that an item had usage or sales activity. This particular item, we sold some in December, some in June, some back in March. Do we want to stock the item? Maybe, maybe not, but I would suggest to you that you really want to examine each and every one of your items that sold, say, in 3 or fewer of the past 12 months. Ask several questions. Okay? Do customers expect the product to be available for immediate delivery? Does the profit margin offset the high cost of carrying inventory? Are we making so much money when we sell this product? Does it justify keeping it on the shelf? Is this item related to other products that we sell? And are those sales profitable? Can a more popular item be sold in place of this slower-moving product? Do we have something else to offer the customer that is more popular? Can we cut our inventory and still meet the customer's needs? Now, these 4 questions had very subjective answers. We could discuss them. We could argue about them all afternoon. But I want to take these questions. I want to take the question of whether you stock a product or not and change it from being a subjective question to being an objective question where there is a right or wrong answer. I want to divide your inventory into 3 categories: the good, the bad, and the ugly. Your inventory is just like a Clint Eastwood movie. You have the good, you have the bad, and unfortunately you probably have the ugly inventory as well. Good inventory, I say here, provides an acceptable return on your investment. You're making money when you sell the product. Making money is good. Bad inventory, you lose money when you sell the product, but it contributes to other profitable sales. How many times has someone said to you, I know we lose money when we sell this, but if we didn't have this, we couldn't sell that. Okay, that's bad inventory, ugly inventory. Stuff that you lose money on, and it doesn't contribute to any other profitable sale. There's no reason for you, in my opinion, ever to have ugly inventory in your warehouse. We want to get rid of it. But how do we objectively define or differentiate between the good, the bad, and the ugly? Well, one way I know we can't do it is by looking at gross margins. Gross margins, the most popular metric for measuring profitability, meaningless. Gross margins are totally meaningless. If I had my way, we would stop using them altogether in business. Many companies have gone bankrupt trying to maximize their gross margin. Now, I know some of you right now are beating your chests and grabbing yourself and saying, oh, how can he say this? It's horrible. You're hugging yourself. How can he say gross margins are bad? We live and die by our gross margins. Well, look at this item. Last year I had sales of $10,000. Pretty good selling item. Cost of goods sold of $6,000, which means I made $4,000 selling this product. That's a 40% gross margin. That's wonderful. But I had $12,000 in inventory. Some of you who are familiar with inventory turnover are saying, well, if he sold $6,000 worth in the year and had $12,000 worth of inventory, that's 1/2 of 1 turn per year. That really isn't very good. And you'd be right. I would have the same gross margin of 40% if I had $1,000 worth of inventory. I would have the same gross margin of 40% if I had $1 billion worth of inventory. Why? Because you don't see inventory in this gross margin equation. To effectively trim your inventory, to make sure that every dollar in your warehouse, in your stores, is working as hard as possible, I want to replace that gross margin equation with a better measurement, something that we call adjusted margin. Similar to gross margin, as you can see on the screen, because we're dividing your profit dollars by your sales dollars, but from the profit dollars, we are subtracting your cost of carrying the average inventory investment. What does it cost you to carry inventory? Well, all of the costs that you accumulate in your warehouse during the time it takes to sell a product once you receive it, the cost of putting away stock receipts, moving material within the warehouse, insuring your inventory, rent utilities for the portion of your warehouse used to store material, physical inventory and cycle counting, counting your products. If you don't buy it, you don't have to count it. Shrinkage and obsolescence. For most of you, this is probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest, component in your cost of carrying inventory. Once you buy something, what is the risk that you will not be able to sell that product? Keep in mind that you do not make money when you buy inventory. You make money when someone buys that inventory from you. Finally, the opportunity cost of the money invested in inventory. Usually that's going to be somewhere between 17-23% of your average inventory value. Translated, that means it costs somewhere between 17 and 23 cents to maintain a dollar's worth of inventory in your warehouse. Now, it is critical that each and every one of you know what your carrying cost is in each and every one of your warehouses. If you go to our website, effectiveinventory.com, you see the home screen in front of you. You see on the left-hand side of the screen, there is a little button that says Carrying Cost. You hit that button, you'll get a questionnaire. You fill out the questionnaire, send it to us at no cost, no obligation. We will calculate your carrying cost and tell you if it is high, low, or just right for someone in your industry, in your geographic region. Please take advantage of this free and very confidential service. You want more information on it? Just let us know. It is important that you know your carrying cost so that you can calculate your adjusted margin, so that you know your true profitability. Here I have an item selling $1,000 worth per year. That's the sale price. Gross profit of $150, which means that the cost of goods sold was what, $850? That's a 15% gross margin. If my carrying cost was 20%, if I had $250 worth of inventory on average in my warehouse, the adjusted margin would be 10%. But as you can see on this screen, if I have $750, the adjusted margin drops to zero. The gross margin hasn't changed at all, but that adjusted margin has dropped and dropped and dropped and dropped. Okay? We need to be sure that we have an adjusted margin that is at least great enough to cover our non-inventory related I get so excited about this. Our non-inventory related operating costs, what we're going to call the NIREP, the non-inventory related expense percentage. Our adjusted margin has to be able to compensate us for our overhead. Okay? We calculate this, we determine this by comparing our adjusted margin to our NIREP. Now, the NIREP, all of our non-inventory related expenses divided by our annual sales, very easy to determine. when you fill out the carrying cost questionnaire that we will provide you at no charge, you will use your profit and loss statement. Some of you will call it an income statement. This is the general ledger report that you get out of your computer system that determines whether or not you're making money. Every expense on that profit and loss statement, on that income statement, can be divided into one of two categories. Either it is inventory related or it's non-inventory related. Inventory related expenses were those that you used in filling out the carrying cost questionnaire. They fit into one of these categories. Your non-inventory related expenses are everything else. Nothing falls through the crack. Every expense is either inventory related or non-inventory related. We take all those non-inventory related expenses divided by your total annual sales. We're going to get your NIREP. It's usually going to be somewhere between 7 and 9%, which means you need an adjusted margin somewhere between 7 and 9% to be making money, to be looking at good inventory. If the adjusted margin is greater than the NIREP, we're making money. Making money is good. We're looking at good inventory. To put it another way, if our profit dollars minus the cost of carrying our average inventory investment, if that exceeds our other expenses, we're making money. That's good. But if the opposite is true, if our profit dollars minus the cost of carrying our average inventory investment, if that is less than our other expenses, we are looking at bad or ugly inventory. We are losing money. How do we tell if it's bad or if it's ugly inventory? Well, not too difficult. It's going to be bad if we're losing money, but we can combine this money-losing item with other complementary items, and the combined adjusted margin is greater than the NIREP. Remember, I used the example before. If we didn't carry this, I couldn't sell that. Well, the that has to be profitable enough to carry the first item, the this, along with it. Okay, if that isn't true, if we can't have what we're going to call a combined adjusted margin, and we'll look at an example in a minute, if that isn't true, if the combined adjusted margin isn't greater than the NIREP, we are losing money. We're looking at ugly inventory. As I say on the sports report, let's go to the videotape. Here we have an item, this bad or ugly item over on the right. This is a dog. I sell $500 worth a year. Cost of goods sold is $400. I'm making $100 profit. Okay? But because I have to buy a carton from the vendor won't sell me one or two pieces at a time. I have an average inventory investment of $500 sitting on my shelf gathering dust. Okay, I want to get rid of this bad or ugly item. But one of my salespeople says, if I don't have this item, I can't offer the entire line to my customers. I need the complete line. Okay, well, let's look at the rest of the line over on the left. Sales of $50,000. Cost of goods sold of $42,500, which means I'm making $7,500 gross profit. Average inventory in the whole line, $5,000. Okay, down at the bottom, you see the adjusted margin equation. I have profits from the entire line and this bad or ugly item. I'm making $7,500 on the entire line, $100 on the bad or ugly item. That's a total of $7,600 minus the cost of carrying everything. The $5,000 plus the $500 is $5,500. My carrying cost is 20% per year. Divided by total sales, well, $50,000 for the line plus $500 for the bad or ugly item is $50,500. That results in a combined adjusted margin of 12.9%. Now remember I said in typical NIREP is 7 to 9%. This is above that. I'm making money. That bad or ugly item over on the right is really bad. I'm losing money, but it's supporting a very, very, very profitable item. But you also might have situations where you're not having a bad or ugly item supporting other inventory. You might be stuck carrying. You might be stuck carrying, I should say, a money-losing item to support a very valuable customer, a customer that is generating a lot of profits for you. Well, let's look at a situation where we're carrying an item for a specific customer. Not only are we carrying one item for this customer, we're carrying a lot of items specifically for this customer. We refer to that as customer-specific inventory. Here I have an average inventory of $50,000 invested in products I am carrying specifically for this customer. Okay? This customer gives us $100,000 worth of business a year. We have a 15% gross margin. You can see that at the bottom, which means I'm making $15,000 gross profit from this customer every year. Okay? But from that $15,000, I have to subtract the cost of carrying the average inventory investment in material I am carrying specifically for this customer. Well, if I calculate an adjusted margin, $15,000 minus 21% of that $50,000, and divide the result by $100,000, which is the total annual sales, I get an adjusted margin of 4.5%. Now, remember I said a typical NIREP is 7 to 9%. This is a money-losing situation. Either I have to increase the profitability of this customer, increase my gross profits, or decrease that average inventory investment I have in this customer-specific inventory. If you go from gross margin to adjusted margin, especially examining the adjusted margin on your slower-moving inventory, you are going to trim the fat out of your warehouse, trim it out of your stores. You're going to get rid of inventory that isn't profitable and doesn't result in other profitable sales. One of the biggest problems I have in today's economy is people don't pay attention to how much they have to buy. They know what they want to buy. They know they have to buy 12 or 24 or 50 of an item because that's what their customers want to buy. What they have to buy is what the vendor is willing to sell them. The difference between what you want to buy and what you have to buy is something that we refer to as planned excess. Okay? How do we calculate planned excess? Well, we take the minimum stock level. Okay? That's where you're going to issue a replenishment order to the vendor. We add the vendor replenishment package quantity. That's how much you want to buy. When we get down to the minimum, we have to buy the vendor package, and we subtract the maximum. This will give us our planned excess. Again, let's look at an example. I have an item that has a minimum quantity of 50 and a maximum of 100. When I get down to 50, I want to buy 50. When I get down to 50, I want to buy enough stock to get me up to 100 pieces. But the vendor, as you can see on this screen, is only willing to sell me 250 pieces at a time. Well, I can't buy 50. I have to buy 250, 200 pieces more than I want to have. So my planned excess value is the minimum of 50 plus the vendor package of 250 minus the maximum of 100. That is 50 plus 250 is 300 minus 100, that's 200 pieces. times $1.50. Ooh, that's $300. I have $300 more than I want to in this item. Note that the value of the maximum, that maximum of 100 pieces times the unit cost of $150, that's $150. So instead of $150 in stock, I actually have $300 more, or $450 in stock. Calculate your planned excess. Look at every situation where the vendor requires you to buy more than you really want to. This may be any instance where you have to buy more than one piece at a time. Sure, you'll do this, but look at the value of the additional inventory you have to buy. We like to calculate the planned excess, take all the values, sort them in descending order, so the item with the highest planned excess value is right up on top. I want to examine these products. Chances are they're going to have an adjusted margin that is very, very low. I want to say, do we really want to stock the product? Can we buy it differently? Can we buy a smaller package? Can we buy individual units, either from the vendor or from another source? One of the things that I have found, if a vendor requires you to buy a large quantity of a product, they have probably required somebody else to also buy a large quantity of a product, and they would be very happy to sell you the number of pieces that you need to fulfill your customers' requests, your customers' needs. Okay? Look for alternate sources of supply. Now, one of the things that we have found in inventory management is something, very technical term, that we call inventory creep. Inventory creep. People add inventory items to their total inventory investment without much thought. They're always bringing in new inventory items. I was at a company last week where anybody could write a purchase order for a new inventory item, bring some in, and see if it would sell. Well, with that sort of philosophy, it is no surprise that most of your dead inventory was probably dead on arrival, leftover quantities of the initial shipment of a new stock item. New stock items, we don't know how many we're going to sell. We have no history. We have to guess. I like new stock items to be maintained, to be replenished with set minimum and maximum parameters until we have enough usage history to accurately forecast demand. Now, when I look at new inventory items, I'm looking at making an investment, and you have to consider it making an investment. You have to consider the same dollars you spend on new inventory items in the same way you look at the dollars you spend in buying a new car or a new boat or something new for your home. You shop, you consider, you analyze. We actually came up several years ago with something that we call the inventory actuarial table. We did a study with the chances of a new inventory item dying once you introduced it to your customer base. We separated new inventory items from several of our customers into three categories. Products with the least chance of dying. Products that if you brought them in, you probably could sell and they would sell well, were ones where you had a firm customer commitment. The customer gave you something in writing. And when I say commitment, I'm talking about something in writing where they would buy the product if you stocked it. Chance of that item dying, we found, very small. There was a risk that the customer would go out of business. There was a risk that the customer, even though they put something in writing, would renege, wouldn't buy what they committed to buy. But the customer knew if they gave you something in writing and they didn't buy it, chances of you stocking another product for them, very small, so they typically would fulfilled their commitments that they had made in writing. Products with a moderate chance of dying were customer and salesperson suggestions. We're going to minimize this risk in a moment, but I want you to look at that third item. Products that we found with the greatest chance of dying were vendor suggestions. You didn't know that you needed to stock it. Your customers never asked for it, but the vendor said this is a new product, you need to stock it. Okay? Be very wary if you're stocking a product only because a vendor suggests that you stock it. Try to get some sort of assurance that you can return any unsold quantity after 6 or 9 months. That is, after the date that you put it on sale to your customers. Now, in looking at new inventory items and predicting how they will sell, keep in mind that new inventory items sell differently. Different items sell differently. I want anyone who requests that a new item be brought into inventory to answer 7 questions. Okay? I want to know, first of all, who is going to buy the product? This is a logical thing to ask, isn't it? Who's going to buy the product if we bring it in? Secondly, why are they going to buy the product from us? Does it complement what we already sell them? Does it provide an additional service to our customers? Those are green flags. Those are good reasons to stock a product. If you say that you will be able to sell it cheaper than anyone else, well, unfortunately, in many cases, that's a red flag. You don't want to get into price wars, especially before you even stock a product. What are the estimates of usage for each of the upcoming 6 months? How many are we going to sell in each of the upcoming 6 months? Now, keep in mind that most new items have a sales pattern that looks like the graph that I just displayed. You introduce the product. In most cases, somewhere between 4 to 8 weeks after introduction, you have a spike in sales. People are trying it. You're promoting it. People want to just see what's new. Keep that in mind because that spike will, in most cases, fall into a normal pattern of sales. Don't get real excited that that spike is going to continue. So carefully analyze your salesperson's, your marketing person's estimates of usage for each of the upcoming 6 months, and in many cases, you want them to include that spike and then have it fall into a regular pattern of usage. Fourth question, equally important, what effect will usage of this item have on sales or usage of other existing stock items? Will this take away sales of another item? First question, do we have to continue to sell the other item? If we do, we want to cut our inventory, cut our replenishment parameters for that product that will no longer have the sales volume after this one is on our shelves. How much do I have to buy and how much of an investment do I have to make? Okay? When you buy new inventory, you are spending money. Keep that in mind. That's money that you could use for other purposes or to buy, in fact, other inventory items. You want to be sure you're putting those dollars to good use. Where will this new item be stored? Our next question. Your warehouse, your store walls are not elastic. You need a place to put the item once it arrives, once it's ready to be sold to your customers. And finally, if this item doesn't take off as we anticipate it taking off, if it doesn't sell to our expectations, can we liquidate our remaining balance? Can we return it to the vendor? I want these 7 questions answered. I want these questionnaires to go to a committee of marketing, sales, purchasing management, people in your organization who know your business and know your customers. If 3 or more members agree to add the product to stock inventory, 3 or more people say, after reviewing the questionnaire, yes, it's a good idea to bring this item into inventory, chances of that item dying are very low. You'll be successful. You will also be successful if you pay attention to who has best been able to predict the sales of new inventory items in the past. Some people have a gift of saying this new item will sell, will be successful with this new inventory item. Other people don't. Make sure that you know who has been successful in the past. But we just don't leave it there. We monitor the success or failure of new inventory items every week. I didn't say every month. I said every week. Every week, I want to have a report distributed at a sales meeting that shows the success or failure of each new inventory item. Typically, items that have been in my store, in my warehouse, for less than, say, 6 months. I want to compare actual sales to the sales projections, to the forecast. Is this meeting our expectations? By reviewing new inventory items, you can adjust your stocking parameters, but you also train your salespeople. You also train your marketing people to make better and more intelligent decisions in the future. Now, before this webinar, I had a conference call with a customer there up in Canada, and they had a problem. Their buyers are being flooded with special offers from vendors, flooded with special offers that they are taking advantage of. We call these forward buys. Well, better pricing gives us better profit margins, right? That's good. But, unfortunately, my customer has to write a check to pay for all this inventory that's being bought. We suggest strongly that you have a budget for your inventory. Jeannie started us off with the title, we're trimming your inventory investment, trimming it. Decide how low you want it to be. Then you tell your buyers, you tell your purchasing people to make the best decisions within this budget. Okay? It's called, in retailing, the amount available for buys, available for purchases. Okay? I'd love to buy lots of different inventory items, but I want to buy the ones that are going to make me the most money and are going to provide the best service to my customers. Very, very important. Okay? Now, how do we know how good our inventory is beyond just looking at the dollars in the warehouse? Okay. Dollars in the warehouse, your inventory investment, very important measurement, but I also like to look at the days supply of inventory that I have. How do I calculate days supply? Well, I take the available quantity divided by the monthly forecast, which is itself divided by 30. The monthly forecast divided by 30, which you see at the top of this screen, is what we call a forecast per day. How many days supply do I have in inventory? If I have a lot of days supply, I'm going to ask my buyers, why do I have this inventory? Can I reduce it? Can I trim it down without harming customer service? For those items that have sporadic usage, that aren't sold or used on a regular basis. As we learned a couple of webinars ago, these items cannot be forecast. We can't predict what we're going to sell per month. We can't even predict when we're going to sell these items. So we calculate how many normal sales quantities we have of these items. We take the available quantity divided by the normal quantity sold or used in one transaction. If I have items that have more than, say, 3 or 4 normal transactions on the shelf, I'm going to say, why can I reduce the inventory? Now, people get confused in reducing inventory. There's a difference between the concept of surplus stock and the concept of excess inventory. Surplus stock is just more than you currently need in a particular facility. But, as I say here, the inventory can definitely be sold or used in a reasonable length of time. If you have surplus inventory, if you just have a little more than you need for the next few weeks or the next month in one store, one warehouse, you may transfer that to another company facility. That's fine. We like to transfer surplus. It's going to increase our turnover, make better use of our inventory dollars, put us in a good position. Excess inventory is far more than can be sold or used in a reasonable length of time. For most of you, it's going to be over a year's worth of a product. You have more of a product than you're going to consume, than you're going to sell in the next 12 months. In most cases, excess inventory, like the stuff, the material that isn't on our approved stock list, that we started with separating the approved stock from our stuff, we're going to liquidate that. Okay. A lot of people ask me, when they have multiple branches, do I buy from the vendor directly into that branch, or do I transfer that to the location from another company warehouse? Do I transfer material to a branch from a distribution center in my company? Well, we've done many very complicated analyses for customers, but we can tell you in some very simple rules how to decide whether or not to transfer material from a distribution center or have it replenished directly from the vendor into a warehouse. If you have a branch, small warehouse, okay, I want to divide every item in that warehouse, every item on the approved stock list of that warehouse, I should say, into two groups. We call them Group A and Group B. We're real original with the names. Group A items have a potential turnover greater than 1/2 the target turnover for the branch warehouse. You should have a turnover objective for each of your facilities. How many times do you want to turn the inventory over in that warehouse? How many times, how many opportunities do you want to have to earn a profit from every dollar invested in that warehouse's inventory? You might have a goal of 4 turns or 6 turns or 8 turns. The articles on our website can help you calculate your potential turnover for your whole organization. The potential turnover for an item is the anticipated annual usage divided by the vendor package quantity. If I bought this from the vendor, how many would I have to buy? Would I have to buy 10, 30, 50 of the item? If I had, say, an anticipated annual usage of 100 pieces, anticipated annual usage of 100 pieces, and I bought the product in a vendor package of 50 pieces, 100 divided by 50 is 2 potential turns for that item in a branch if I replenish that item directly from the vendor. Okay? Group A items have a potential turnover greater than half the target turnover of the branch warehouse. Okay? If my target turnover for that entire branch warehouse was, say, 4 turns a year, and I could sell 2 vendor package quantities, the item would be in Group A. But if I could only sell 1 vendor package quantity and my target turnover was 4 turns a year, the item wouldn't be in Group A. Anything that is in Group A is, strangely enough, in Group B. These are products with a potential turnover less than half the target turnover of the branch warehouse. Okay. Group B items, my slower-moving items. These are items with a potential turnover less than half the target turnover for the branch warehouse. Those will always come out of a distribution center, okay, unless the cost of transferring them is very, very, very high, prohibitively expensive to handle. But my Group A items, I'll replenish them from a vendor. I'll replenish them on a purchase order from a vendor if I can buy from that vendor directly into that warehouse at least once a month. Okay? If I can bring in a vendor order with just those Group A items at least once a month into that branch warehouse, I'm going to replenish those items with a vendor purchase order. Okay. We've talked a lot today about trimming your inventory. We have a pile of stuff. We have some excess inventory. What do we do with it? Well, we just don't throw it away. We liquidate it. Liquidating your stuff in excess inventory. Very important process. It is the process of getting as much money as possible for that material. Anything that you get above the cost of disposal, you should consider to be found money. Okay. A report should list the items that you want to get rid of, the stuff, the excess inventory, in descending order based on your current inventory value, the value of the material that you want to liquidate. And remember, very difficult sometimes to remember, that inventory is a sunk expense. Once you've bought it, you own it. It's not worth what you paid for it. It's worth what someone is willing to pay you for it. One of my favorite movies is Wall Street. In that movie, Michael Douglas's character, Gordon Gekko, says, "Don't get emotional about stock. It clouds your judgment." He was referring to stock as in the stock market. It is more important for all of you not to get emotional about your stock inventory. If you can't sell it in a reasonable amount of time, liquidate it. Get rid of it. The more money you can get for it, the better, but move it. Transfer the excess stock to another company location where the inventory is needed. Something may be dead as a doornail in Los Angeles, but still be selling in San Francisco or San Diego. If customers have discretion over what they buy, if they can choose, say, between a green or a brown unit, reducing the price, offering salespeople an incentive to sell the product can usually move your stuff, move your excess inventory. Okay? Most products, if you lower the price low enough, will sell at some price if customers have discretion over what they buy. Advertising. The availability of this material to other suppliers. Never been easier. Do a search on the internet with the words surplus, inventory, and the product line, the type of product you want to liquidate. You'll be surprised at the number of sources that are available now for liquidating excess material and stuff. Okay? Normally, these brokers will get a commission, say 10% of the sale price. Hey, but it's money you wouldn't have had otherwise. True, you won't have as much stuff in your warehouse gathering dust, but you'll have more dollars in your checking account to invest in better inventory. Okay? So use the internet to find people who will help you liquidate your stuff, liquidate your unwanted inventory. You can contact us. We may know someone in your industry who specializes in liquidating this type of material. If you can substitute a product for a less expensive item, if you have excess inventory in a more expensive product, substitute it for a less expensive item. Give the customer a deal when they want the less expensive one, give them the premium one. It may be the most that you can get for that particular item. Keep in mind, again, inventory is a sunk expense. Anything we can get for it above the cost of disposal is found money. We want to get as much as possible, and oftentimes that involves substituting the product for a less expensive item. Take advantage of returns policies that vendors offer. Make sure that you have your return ready. Anytime the vendor is willing to accept return material, negotiate vendor returns for unsold material. Okay. Make this part of your overall vendor negotiations. Even if the vendor will only say, we'll take this back and give you a credit against future purchases, at least you can buy material that can be sold or used in the future. Donating material to a nonprofit organization. If you're a Subchapter C corporation, you can deduct up to twice the cost of the material. Write that off. But if you're a Subchapter S corporation, a partnership, any other business entity, donating material will give you a warm and fuzzy feeling. But it will free up space in your warehouse for your good inventory, the material on that approved stock list. Same way you can free up space if you just throw stuff away. If it's never going to sell, don't hold on to it. Get rid of it. Okay? Some of my customers have been forced to lower their inventory. Their creditors, their banks have said, you've got to lower your inventory investment. How do we do this? Well, as we've been discussing for the past hour, reduce your excess inventory. Reduce excess inventory, especially of fast-moving items. Stop buying them. Don't fill in purchase orders with fast-moving products because, quote, they always sell. We've got to turn the inventory over of those products. If you have to reduce your total inventory investment, if you're forced to, buy smaller quantities. Don't always go for the best deal. Look at the lowest investment that you have to make. If you can't reduce your inventory enough by reducing your excess inventory or buying smaller quantities, you can reduce your safety stock, your reserve inventory, the inventory that you keep on hand just in case customers ask for more than you plan for them to, or there's a delay in getting you a replenishment shipment from the vendor, or you can eliminate some sporadic slow-moving items from your stock. I don't like to do those last two items unless I absolutely have to. That is reducing safety stock, eliminating some sporadic items, because it does have a detrimental effect on customer service. Okay? So in summary, what have we talked about in the last hour? Well, I want you, in order to trim your inventory effectively, to examine your slow-moving inventory and do this separately in each branch, each warehouse, each store. Should each product remain a stocked item in that location? Should it be discontinued? Can you centrally warehouse? Can it be transferred as needed from a central warehouse, from a distribution center? Utilize a new item questionnaire. Analyze your new item performance. Carefully spend the money you have invested to bring in those products that your customers really, really, really want. Limit purchases of non-stock products. What do I mean by that? Well, just buy what a customer is willing to buy of a product that is not on your approved stock list. Finally, monitor your planned excess. All of these things are going to help you achieve the goal of effective inventory management. And with that, we're almost out of time. I'm going to turn it back over to Jeannie.